have the book. Okay. I thought because of the events of last Wednesday, that we might take a few minutes to look back at some of the principles that Carter talked about last week to see which ones have come to mind for us as we've seen what happened in the Capitol. So is there anything that we talked about last week that you all would like to revisit?
Well, just the technical aspects.
The what?
The technical aspects of printing it.
I don't know what you mean.
We couldn't print it.
Mary Beth?
Well, I hate to be small, but I do need to be honest. Number one, I am not liking these people. I don't like these people who believe alternative stories, in news and that stuff. And, essentially we have a militia or, an army now developed, armed and in communication and with a common enemy, which happens to be the rest of us. And I don't like that, but I do need to be civil to them. And Ted preached on that yesterday very strongly. We've got to.
What did he have to say? What did
Anyone?
Ted have to say?
He was saying that we need to spread light into this situation, and we have to do it from a place that Jesus would be doing it from, which is a place of love and compassion. And
Ted told me when Ted's sermon spoke to me that no matter how self-righteous I think I am, that right. I am in some way, shape, form, or fashion complicit in all of this. And that's who I need to work on, is me and how I find a way. That doesn't mean I'm saying what they're doing is right.
No, that's not what you're saying.
There is a civil way, if I may. And I'm not sure what that path is. I'm still searching for it. But I'm willing to work as hard as I can to figure it out.
I think that's a really good point. I think that when you see something like you watch, like that cop being smashed in between the doors and him screaming in pain, or the anger in people's faces, I think impulsively, I guess the frontal lobes of our brains respond in kind. And then I think what we have to do is to call on our better angels and know that if we respond to that the way we're confronted with it, that we turn into what we most fear.
Yes.
Did anyone see Arnold Schwarzenegger's 7-minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was real. That was well done, I thought.
Excellent.
I didn't. What was the gist of it?
About it, yeah.
Well, very much what we're talking about is sort of we need to put it behind us, but
I
also
didn't say behind us though.
he also said we need to. He's very disappointed in Trump as a Republican and other Republicans.
I heard him trying to help us understand where this comes from.
Yeah, I did too.
And growing up in Austria and leading up to, didn't he talk about having an alcoholic or a drunk father who would come home? Was that? Yeah.
He talked about the pent up, the rage and the anger and the guilt that his father's generation felt for having been members of the Nazi Party, right. And it turned into sort of that. It was the norm for children to have fathers who were abusive and alcoholic and angry and all these things because of the guilt that they felt. I mean, that was his sort of interpretation of why they acted the way they did.
I guess they had PTSD, but of course that wasn't used at that time. He also compared it to Kristallnacht.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, this is our Kristallnacht. The other thing I was thinking of is I come from a really big family, family of origin. So lots of cousins. I mean, Catholic, everybody had tons of kids. So, lots of families have that, and in my case, it's crazy cousin Stanley or the crazy uncle so-and-so. So the one that kind of is easily off the rails and you don't understand, family doesn't understand where they're coming from. I have a brother that can fall into this very quickly. And it's, I don't understand what it is. And somebody said the brain, the reptilian, I heard somebody say triggering that.
Yeah, it's a reptilian
brain.
The
And
amygdala.
when you think about, we've had 4 years of drip, 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 you know, and if you haven't balanced your input with different points of view, and if you just have one source where you get everything from, talk radio, Fox News, whatever, and it's drip, 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 it's like, you know, that's the way our brain is. It helps me before I can get to a level of forgiveness if I can understand. So St. Francis says, seek first to understand before you are understood. Isn't that the way it goes? Seek first to something, whatever.
Yeah, to speak to that process, I don't want to derail us from this morning, but trying to live these principles for the last 4 years has been really hard for me. And I've tried various inner work techniques to help myself deal with the presidency of Donald Trump with a degree of love and understanding. I've gone through some real spiritual and psychological gymnastics to try to do that. And I can't tell you I've done it very successfully. But what did help me was Mary Trump. And
Yes.
Yeah.
and the more that I could, I came out of an alcoholic marriage, and so I learned a lot about denial, and I couldn't bring myself to continue to deny reality in order to try to be more accepting of this man, but knowing what he grew up with, knowing that he was conditioned from the time he was an infant to believe that he couldn't be a loser, to believe certain things about himself. I could see his behavior for the last year at least as a product of that dysfunctional family, and that it helped me be much more compassionate than I had been for understanding why he has done the things that he has done. I'm not sure that means anything to anybody, but it was helpful to me.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
I think it is too. I think it's very helpful.
Absolutely.
I also think that when you look at this mob of people, I have a feeling there's an element of exploitation there. And I also have a feeling that that people in power are maybe, when I analyze it more, are the people that I think should have to be held accountable.
Yes.
Because I think this mob of people you're looking at don't really have the power they have. You just saw, that's it. But I think there are far more influential people that have pulled these strings for a long time.
I also feel being on this Monday morning group of people brings some sanity to the issue for me.
See, it's one of the things that you can tell is these autocrats have to have an enemy. And that's where it comes in conflict with the civility that we're talking about. You know, Hitler had an enemy, it was the Jews. Trump had an enemy, it's the Muslims, and then he turned it on to the Democrats North Korea, the enemy is the United States. So these guys, when they start off with an enemy, you know it's going to end up like this. you know, and the problem is we're made to be the enemy. You know, I'm trying to be civil and I'm the enemy. You know, we're free press is the enemy, you know, and you have all these falsehoods. Every dictator since the beginning of time has come up with that. And that's why we have so many wars, because there's a good Star Trek episode way back when for all of you older folks, where there's a guy with his face is half white and half black, and the other guy's face is half white and half black. They look identical, except the white and the black is reversed. And they hate each other, you know, they just hate each other. And everybody has, not everybody, but these guys like that have to have an enemy, and they rise to power by having an enemy. And the problem is we're not the enemy, but we're the victims of this whole thing. And I don't know how civility fits into that. You know, do we wait until we have a riot at the Capitol? I mean, where do we go? You know, I'm almost tempted to go up to shooters and get myself an AK-47 for, you know, because how much pushing around can you take? Yeah, I guess I'm venting right now. But,
I'm looking at, you have, Sandra, you've got on here, Principle 11, civility discourages the use of legislation rather than conversation to settle disputes, especially except as a last carefully considered resort. And the chapter that comes from is oh God, I underlined a lot in this chapter. What was the name of the chapter? Well, the heading, Civility, Dialogue, and Bishop Seabury. And Samuel Seabury, bishop and guiding spirit of the early Episcopal Church, made this point in a sermon he preached in 1777. He argued that the cultivation of the benign and friendly aspects of human nature was the only way to avoid the division and violence that would come from following our malevolent dispositions. He's almost, without the gentle parts of our character, we were monsters. So it's almost like he's assuming that we all have that potential, is how I'm reading this.
Cain and Abel.
Yeah, and then, yeah, well,
Cain and
certainly
Abel.
throughout scripture.
I think we do all possess that within us. And I think, Tom, to respond to you, I didn't raise my hand, forgive me. I think our natural impulse, especially, this is a generalization that I shouldn't make, but more for men, I think, than women, is to just get the AK-47 and go and mow them back down, and because for a righteous cause. But on the other hand, we can't become who they are. It's a never-ending cycle. And I think civility toward others, number one, our duty to be civil toward others does not depend on whether we like them or not, means that we cannot resort to their means. We have to maintain our moral center. That doesn't mean not bringing them to justice. I personally don't believe in the death penalty, but it doesn't mean that they're not subjected to the absolutely full extent of the law and are prosecuted for what they've done. And I think everybody who participated in that, whether they actually committed acts of violence or breached the Capitol itself, I think everybody should be held accountable as part of that insurrection. But I think being civil means that we maintain our moral center and apply the law fairly and don't resort to violence ourselves, don't resort to name calling ourselves, don't resort to hate.
The problem that I see is that you still have a lot of legislators who do not want to go ahead and use our legal system to do exactly what you've said. And in Germany, it wasn't the good German people who finally saved them. It was other countries of the world that had to come together. And that's what I can personally see could happen to us here, is that most most people in the country are very, very decent human beings, but all you need is to have one person that's not, and then through his rhetoric, get everyone incited, and then we all become the lambs to the slaughter.
The other thing too is, does anybody know who John Anderson is?
Well, we know a John Anderson, Lucy and I do, but we're hoping and praying it is not the same one. No.
Well, you know, this for those that don't know, this is a guy from St. Augustine that got arrested in the Capitol building, right, for
Right.
illegal trespass. Have you seen anything in the paper about him? Have you seen a word about him? However, if some kid steals a loaf of bread, now I'm getting back to the original book, social justice. Some kid steals a loaf of bread and he's on the jail log. We have a friend whose son was, he's got serious bipolar disorder, and he was arrested for driving erratically or something. And his name got in the paper and everybody knew about it. All right. But this guy, John Anderson, is he connected? You know, does he own
I doubt it.
a Yugo dealership someplace? I mean, what makes this guy immune to public scrutiny? Let's put it that way.
I mean, was he arrested on federal charges, and that's why it's not in our local jail log? Because I've been looking in the jail log too. I mean,
yeah, I know he's not in the jail log because it's a federal thing, but
it still hasn't been. His name still isn't in the newspaper at all after all these days.
The guy with the horns from Arizona, he's in the paper. But
and they should have a picture of him.
They should.
Page.
Right.
No.
They do not have a picture of him as of yet. We haven't seen it.
We haven't seen
it.
No.
Nothing.
Nothing. More information.
Sandra wants to interrupt.
I wanted to ask Melinda to finish her point, and then yes, I'd like to speak. Melinda, go ahead and finish.
Just a quick addendum to what Tom and Mary Frances were saying is, I think that obviously we need to resort to arms when there is no other, when we need to stop a movement. I don't mean that I'm a complete pacifist. Of course we need to resort, the Army, the National Guard, they needed to have stopped that at the moment it started happening. And that's a whole other angle we need to, that's going to be investigated. But I just mean, as us as individuals, how do we respond to others? I mean, we can't become who they are. And I think that's where the civility sort of lies. I don't know, and that's all I have to say.
Yeah. Can we take it up there? Because I think, am I on? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If we might, Carter does speak to these issues. And if I may, I'd like for us to consider that together. So can we start into the book for a moment here and see where it takes us? I'm referencing page 101, which is in the section called Sacrifice and Neighbor Love. And this is what Carter has to say about it. The command to love our neighbors does not demand of us the psychologically impossible, that we actually feel an emotional intimacy toward every person we meet. But it does require us to act with love toward others. This rule demands of us a hard discipline that may seem ill-suited to our self-indulgent age. Now that's about as unsuited to last Wednesday as it gets. If we decide to treat others well merely in order to provide a social lubricant, we quickly begin to make enough exceptions to swallow the rule. This one does not deserve respect because he's so rude, that one because of her political views, a third one because of some deep secret that was suddenly a part of public knowledge. I suspect it will be possible to treat each other with love only if we are able to conceive doing so as a moral obligation that is absolute, something that we owe others because of their personhood, bearing no relation on whether we like them or not. I'm reminded of an incident that Andrew Young describes in which his household was being surrounded and his family threatened. And he had a gun, and he told his wife he was going out on the porch to negotiate with them. And if the violence started, she should use it. And she said to him, you know, those are children of God out there, and I'm not going to take their lives. Those are the hard choices. If we continue on with some of what he has to say about this, to enter into the presence of another human being then is to enter into the presence of God in a new and different way. As I was reading this, I was trying to imagine, you know, that guy with the painted face and the horns yesterday, you know, and how am I to enter into how am I to deal with him, to view him, to take what he is doing as God in a new and different way? That is really, really hard. But we're called to do that. We are admonished in the psalm to come into his presence with thanksgiving, not with self-suspicion, self-serving, or disrespect. Consequently, we see the obligation of civility entails more than the charitable acts. It entails a habit of mind, an orientation of the soul toward the other, the one who is outside of us, the one who may seem different from us, and yet is part of us as through our equal share in God's creation. So a real personal spiritual challenge for me was to look at that man yesterday and try to see God in him. And yet I'm called to do that, or at least to try to do that to the extent that I'm able to.
I wonder, may I just ask a question?
Yeah.
I wonder if I did read the book a while ago though. I wonder if when it's hard to look at the God in someone else, if it might be easier to look at the God in you.
Well, if I take in my own spiritual path, I have to do that. As I've mentioned before, in these times that are so troubling, I believe that our work has to be on both a macro level and on a micro level. It's up to me to do my work and to try to be as clear and reasoned and loving as possible under the circumstances. But it also calls on me as a part of the body politic to act publicly, to act as a part of the political system of which we are all a part, to absolutely insist that we will not elect people who will consistently lie to us. I will not give my personal support. I would like to see us have an organization that would say nationally, I will not vote for someone who uses such divisive language that democracy can't work. I won't vote for someone who gives me information that is incorrect consistently. I will not vote for you if you act in this way. So this is Sandra speaking, not Carter speaking, but it's where I believe we have to go, both as a mass, a critical mass of loving people who absolutely refuse to give any support to any public official or business official that acts in this kind of way. But that's my idealistic take on it this morning. It might be helpful to go back to Carter on this too. There is a significant chapter on critical listening, because it's really hard for us to do, to hear people whose views are hurtful to our own spiritual well-being. But on page 137, he makes an interesting point. Civil listening is not easy. particularly because it demands of the civil listener a considerable risk. Civil listening is a part of civil dialogue, a loving and respectful conversation in which we try for a moment at least to experience the other's worlds as our own. Empathy does not capture the idea, for empathy conveys no more than understanding the other's point of view, although I would say it would be helpful to start there. As any lawyer knows, understanding the other's point of view is simply a tool to use in crafting an effective refutation of the other's argument. The ideal of civil listening is best captured in a simple word, is not captured in a simple word or in a simple explanation. What it does mean is to be open to what others have to say. It means quite simply to acknowledge the possibility that they may be right. We must approach each other in disagreement with openness and not cynicism. The cynicism is the enemy of reason, and thus of civility. It suggests a deep distrust of the motives of our fellow passengers, a distrust that ruins any prospect of treating others well because they deserve it. But if I expect you to listen respectfully to me and to give me a genuine opportunity to convert you to my way of thinking, civility requires me to listen respectfully to you and to give you a genuine opportunity to convert me to your way of listening. So this is tough. This is tough. But in light of what has happened, I fear cynicism. Throughout the book, he says several times, cynicism is the enemy of democracy. So I have been holding on to the straw since last Wednesday that we as a people will not fall into cynicism. It would be so easy to do that in light of the violence that has been going on, but I'm grateful to Carter for reminding me how important it is that we try to do that.
Can I ask how many of you know Irvin Bullock?
Oh, yes.
Yes. To watch her in action when she practices, and she's been through lots of training. She was on the Peace and Justice through the Presbyterian. I mean, she has lots of training. So to watch her when she is engaging is quite something. An example of that is when the Islamic Center was being picketed. Oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And she organized and it was through Compassionate St. Augustine, a bunch of people to show up, and all the ministers that showed up wore their collars. There were probably about 60 of us that showed up to show support for the Islamic Center. And then, they're out there, the protesters are out there with their flags and their this and that, and, trying to be obnoxious with the traffic going by and what have you. Irvin walks up to them. She had a stand of lemonade and cookies. So she set up her stand. She had lemonade and cookies, and she just would take lemonade, no cookies over there. Would you like some lemonade? And then she would engage in conversation. And finally she said, what would you like to happen here? And they said, we want them to put the American flag up. And so the imam said, well, not a problem. So he went and got their flag. They had a stand and they put it in the stand, and, it just kind of dissipated. It was just like that. It was just pretty amazing to watch. And so now it's like, what would Irvin do?
Something else that I think is a good thing to do too is when you see people who ideologically you don't agree with, or I shouldn't say that, I should say politically you don't agree with probably, but and they're doing something that you feel is morally right, is to tell them how much you honor what they're doing. I think about the politicians in Georgia who were conservative Republicans who simply refused to recount those votes. The governor who simply refused to be involved in that. And I think letting those people know that you really honor their integrity, even though you don't agree with them, is an important bridge to, or the representative, I think he's from Arizona, who's come out for Trump's impeachment. It takes a lot of guts to do that when you ideologically agree with the party you belong to. And I think that should be honored. So I guess that's another idea.
Carter spends a good bit of time talking about the language of violence. To read just a bit of what he had to say. Cleansing our language of violence is not simply a matter of politeness, it is a matter of morality. And at a practical level, it is a matter of making conversation work. Nasty language, whether vulgar, violent, or simply bigoted, does nothing to encourage a thoughtful and reasoned response. It sparks anger or shame, but not dialogue. It makes it harder for us to talk to each other, and thus hurts democracy. I do not mean to suggest that displaying anger is always bad. True, we tend to think of anger as a negative. We refer to it as loss of temper, suggesting that it should have been kept. And the Bible admonishes us, the soft answer turns away wrath. But social historians have suggested that the belief that anger should be controlled is itself a marker phenomenon stemming from, among other things, the development of an industrial economy, for which for an employee, a short temper is often a weakness. Behavioral scientists believe that anger is functional, but because laboratory studies suggest angry subjects have a significantly greater self-confidence than others, the potential for greater courage as well, some theorists argue that anger has been important in the establishment of civilization. Anger surely made it easier for primitive humans to face down a deadly enemy or to prove themselves in a variety of ways to doubters. So he talks about still the fact that anger is functional offers scant defense for aping the language of anger in everyday speech. He makes quite a lot of comment about how we have allowed over time for our speech to become more riddled with vitriol, with snide remarks. Probably the hardest challenge for me to try to live a Quaker life is that Quaker belief requires moderation of speech. And of all the things that I try to live with, that is the hardest for me, moderation of speech, because if you care passionately about something, it's really hard not to get over the top in the way we express it. Of course, the use of language of violence. I don't know whether you all counted. I stopped at 9, and I may be incorrect, but 9 times in that speech, Trump used the word fight. And if you listen to the context of fight, it was always in a kind of metaphorical, general sense about fighting for our values, you know. But his body language was doing this. And the people, that repetition of that word, fight, 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 I hope that's used as some kind of evidence, if it is ever brought forward, that he was actually inciting a riot. I don't know how anyone listening to that speech and the repetition of the word fight would come away with any other conclusion about it. Did you all have thoughts? Yes, please.
I want to say that when I was an active psychotherapist, I used to train folks in anger management. And what we talked about was triggers and anger as a masking emotion. And what frustrates me and what gets my anger going is that we're all sitting here on lockdown, but we still got people that are saying that COVID's a hoax. So I have a tough time keeping that under. But what I also say is that down since the beginning of time, the Native Americans and others used to use the war drum to get people, get their adrenaline roaring and roaring and roaring. And once your adrenaline is rushing, and you can ask anybody that was an athlete, there's been athletes that have broken their legs and haven't felt the pain. By getting everybody's adrenaline so fired up with that speech, these people have lost their frontal lobe, the ability to make good executive decisions, and it's gone into their amygdala, which is the more reptilian survival. These people are trying to take our way of life. They're trying to take our survival away. I thought the police officers down there were quite civil, even though that they were overrun. I mean, I would have been, they diffused it as best they could with what they had. But anger management, you know, is very difficult because people are walking around with this chip on their shoulder that's been bred into them before the election. You know, in 2016, if the individual in the White House lost, he said it was going to be rigged if I lose. You know, so I mean, this has been going on since the beginning. But anyway, yeah, the anger management part is very difficult.
As early, we remember this book was written in 1997. And as early as 1997, Carter was warning about the effect of the internet in being able to mobilize and inculcate people. And he talks about that on page 198.
Sandra,
Michael, yes.
excuse me, you had a comment. I don't know if you want to jump in now.
Oh, yes.
You're muted.
I want to hear Sandra first, please.
Okay.
Michael DeRosis of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, in his book, What Will Be, describes research on the body net. What he's talking about is the information cocoon that people get into when they start dealing with others on the internet, which will essentially allow us to walk down the street embedded in a cocoon of digital information. We will do research, chat online, stay in touch with the office, play video games everywhere we are, all without the bother of any handheld device. The wonders of the ordinary world, the colors, the sounds, the smells, the sheer life excitement, unpredictability of it will eventually fall away, replaced by a self-created existence, a virtual world tailored to our liking. We will eliminate our fellow passengers, the way the fellow got rid of the world in the classic Twilight Zone episode. A flick of a virtual switch and we can pretend that the real world is the myth and the mythical world the real one. Or maybe I should not say pretend, because we are shrouded in our body nets. As it may turn out, the so-called real world that is contingent on our individuality constructed cyber world that is real. The more we are able to tailor the world to our liking, listen to those words in terms of the consciousness of those people in that riot, the more we are able to tailor the world to our liking, the less civil we are likely to be. Civility requires us to act with love toward our neighbors, to sacrifice on their behalf. But the cyber world proposes we have no neighbors, that we know no unimpeachable facts about them, and even that we can actively reinvent them. It is easy to be rude online precisely because the people with whom we argue are faceless. seem no more real than the machine that transmits their words to our screen. And so safe behind their anonymity and taking advantage of theirs, we say things that we would not dream to utter face to face. I thought it was helpful this morning that they took down Parler. Parler is one of the sites that the social media sites that people who participated in this episode relied on, and that a few business leaders, rather than the people that we have elected to office, are shutting down some of these really dangerous avenues of discord that have caused the problem that we're looking at.
Sandra, who shut Parler down?
I think it was Amazon was one of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good.
Google.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Amazon, Google, and I think Facebook.
Facebook too.
So this is Hugh. I wonder, Sandra, and to the group, I wonder, would Professor Carter, Dr. Carter, Stephen Carter, would Dr. Carter tell me or coach me, suggest that I follow or at least dabble in the whole spectrum? In other words, I've selected the media that I trust. I selected the people and the news organizations that I feel are giving me the facts. I'm entitled, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. I mean, that was Moynihan. And so what I'm asking is for me to better understand the other side, the lieutenant colonel, the retired lieutenant colonel in the middle of that mob who has now been arrested, for me to understand how he could see this assault on the Capitol as a part of who he is, as a legitimate action on his part. That is beyond my comprehension. So he is hardwired into these other sources of information. Is it information if it's false?
Disinformation.
Okay, he's hardwired into these pieces, into these that I refuse to go out and, because it's just so beyond me to understand. But would Carter say, this is how I can take a step towards understanding them so that I can then see them as children of God, so that I can be in awe, even if I don't know who they are? This is a very hard question for me because it's so clear. I'm so confident that I know what I'm talking, that I'm right, and not listening to Parler, not listening to Fox News, not listening to who I call demagogues on the other side of the spectrum. But am I right? Isn't there a possibility that I'm wrong? And that is the challenge I'm facing, personal challenge.
I can share, my personal strategy for trying to understand. I found it interesting. I occasionally watch Fox News. It's a rule of debate that she who does not know her opponent's argument does not know her own. And so I watch Fox News because, first of all, the American public does not understand the difference between news and political commentary. Fox News Channel is owned by Rupert Murdoch and is commentary. MSNBC is largely commentary. I watch Fox News. Fox News was the only network so far I've seen that has named the girl that died. They gave her name and her picture.
She was on other news.
Was it on other news?
Yeah,
I-
we saw her face and we saw her name.
Did
Yes,
you-
last night.
Well, Fox News, it was the first I had the only one that I've seen that has done it.
But how did they present her? Did they present her as a fallen hero?
No, but they did present her in mourning, in a spirit of mourning. But then I began to wonder, what else am I not knowing? It's really hard to understand, as Hugh was just saying, how an individual that had pledged his life to defend the Constitution would participate in basically what was a rebellion against the government of the United States.
Well, the woman that was shot coming through the window and killed was a retired Air Force
16 years.
officer.
She had been to Kuwait and Iraq and everything. And her husband even said that she had been radicalized and she believed thoroughly everything that was all of the truths that were not really true, but in her mind, they were true.
She voted for Obama.
Yes.
Yeah.
She voted for Obama, yet then she, I guess, yeah.
Carter makes an interesting comment that's kind of germane to what we're talking about right now. And this is about the internet, because people are getting radicalized by getting themselves into these, what they call them, cyber bodies or whatever, into these cocoons in which they're constantly fed misinformation. And so something interesting to say, this is on page 201. You can spend your days and nights metaphorically surrounded by anonymous people who gleefully assure you that your most unlikely fantasies are reality.
Mhm.
Gleeful because you are simultaneously assuring them. In this mutual affirmation, you can deny the truth of anything from outside your circle that may contradict what you already believe. In fact, you may ignore the outside altogether. If this behavior If this behavior took place anywhere but online, we would doubtless mutter about a cult. The student of civility must surely view it with despair.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't seen a series on both HBO and Starz about a cult called Nexium that was founded to make the world a better place, that attracted people from industry and from the entertainment business and basically brainwashed these people into doing things like becoming branded with a hot cauterizing iron. It's strange that what is scary about the series, you can stream it if you have HBO. What's scary about it is that intelligent, efficacious, successful people got into this loop and participated in something that was illegal and highly destructive.
It has nothing to do with intelligence.
It has nothing to do with intelligence.
I would suggest that, at least for myself, there is a possibility that if I were surrounded by that kind of information and I had somebody beating a drum and get my adrenaline flowing, that I might be convinced to act in ways that I wouldn't act in without that external experience, without people telling me that stuff. So I think that all of us, but I can only speak for myself, have the possibility, we have the potential to do things, to be talked into doing things that we don't think we could do. Just throwing that out there. And so it goes along with what a lot of you have been saying, and it goes along with, I think, number 7 and 8 of the major points that Carter makes. So for, you know, to have differences, but to be respectful, you know, if I'm humble enough to know that I could be potentially talked into doing something that other people I respect, like you, would criticize, you know, I mean, which is possible, then I need to get with people who disagree with me now and treat them with respect, and, you know, and try and do what these living room conversations and people like Barb Lofquist, who are being trained to lead them, you know, act with people I disagree with in ways that they're reading, that I'm open to what they have to say. I mean, I would like to know, as some of you said, I would like to know what was going through the minds of some of those veterans, you know, who swore allegiance to the country, and how their mind, you know, like what happened to them, and to make them think that what they were doing was for the country, because they clearly do.
They believe the lie that the election was corrupt and stolen, and that was from the top, saying it for the last 5 years.
Right.
And if you say a lie long enough and hard enough to enough people, it becomes the truth.
That's right.
And now with the internet, you can't stop it.
Right. So
The other thing is to look at what their training is,
yes.
how they're conditioned, who is the person that signs up to go into the military, what happens once they're in there in their training. It all probably doesn't happen in a vacuum.
No.
And to me, it seems totally I had occasion to be in 2 gun stores in the last 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
I had to get some guns out of the house, and my husband has a few guns. So, and I have a brother-in-law who is a gunsmith / dealer in Minnesota. So I'm going to send him to Pat. All this. So I had to go and find an authorized dealer. So I'm standing in line, busy places at the gun store.
Yeah.
Going in, standing in line, and this is after Christmas, and then looking at the walls with the automatic weapons are on full display, and how many of the hangars where they had the automatic weapons were empty. And they just had a few.
Oh, I think Barbara just froze, or I did. Give it a sec.
Lived on a farm and everybody had a gun. You did. You had to, you know, you just had a gun. Because if you called 911, there was no 911 and nobody was going to come if you needed help. You know, I mean, you were on.
Yep.
So.
But that was also a hunting community. You know, we have friends that are hunters in upstate New York, and they weren't walking around trying to take over the country. You know, something there's a disconnect there. But it reminds me, and when we were looking at the police problems and the defund the police and everything, which was a terrible phrase, but it came to mind a phrase that if you're trained to be a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And these guys are all trained in physical violence and everything else. And then all you have to do is explain to them by the commander-in-chief that the democracy as we know it is about ready to end because the Democrats have stolen the election. Well, you know, hey, if I thought somebody was going to steal the election and democracy as I knew it was going to end, I think I'd be fired up to do something about it. But there's a whole lot of dynamics compared to that. You know, as simple as these guys might even have been in the military before women were permitted to take an active role, you know, and they think America's not as great as it used to be. So.
Since our time is getting limited, I'd be interested in your ideas about how to go forward. I would propose two things to you. First, I am serious about trying to contact Dr. Carter with our questions. My most significant question to him is, why have you not updated the book? You know, what are you doing in light of what's happening now? So you have my email, and I really urge you to ponder the questions that this Wednesday incident has raised in light of what we've been reading in the book. And I'll send it. I will try to reach him again. We don't know whether he will answer. He is still a professor at Yale. Whether that could make his response not very timely in light of what professors are having to do these days. I don't know, and he may not answer us, but we will at least have had the satisfaction of positive action to try to do our own inner work.
Mhm.
And that's what's important here.
But, you know, when I was reading the book, in my mind, I was taking issue with some of his positions on things. But
Yeah.
as I was thinking about it, it's not a book about positions. It's a book about when you disagree with other people who have different positions. What are the principles? Principles are principles. He'd probably say the principles of civility don't change. Has my position changed on some of these? Yeah, maybe, but so what? You know, I don't know. For me, it's not, as I read the book, that wasn't the point anymore.
Another point I would make to our group, the events of the last few weeks have encouraged me to relinquish 130 books on social justice and multicultural education and citizen activism to the St. Johns County Library. So the library came and took what they could use. Sometimes they couldn't use the book because of its condition, sometimes because there were other more updated versions of what I had to say. But they are processing them. The collection will be called the Building Community Library. It will be available to the public in a few months. The books that they didn't take, I didn't take them to the church because I thought the church isn't open very often and the general public wouldn't have access to them. So I took them onto the public library. But in the collection, there is one of the books called Rising Out of Hate. And it's the story of a young man whose last name is Black, who was the son of the Grand Dragon of the Florida Klan. This boy grew up in a Klan family. He was the leader of the young Klan group. He was the person who prepared the material for the Klan publications. And this boy is now an anti-racist. And the process of how an influence from babyhood could be overturned into one of a lifetime now commitment to social justice. It is an interesting story. I'm hoping that the Stetson Kennedy Foundation will bring him to talk to us, to hopefully do something with WJCT. So again, I believe we have personal action and then we have public action that all of us need to take. So when the book is available, I recommend it to you. The very best material that I've used in the past, they didn't want because of conditions. So some of that will go to the church library once I get all that together. But the second individual that I hope to bring with the Stetson Kennedy Foundation is a man named Daryl Davis that some of you may have seen on TV. Daryl is a jazz musician in the Washington area that makes friends with Klansmen. And when they leave the clan, they give Daryl their robes. Daryl has 33 clan robes, or did when I took Stetson's clan robe to the Smithsonian back in 2012. He had 33. I guess I'm telling you these stories because in both cases, the change that were brought about in these individuals was because of their personal relationship with people that they then began to trust. When I look at my own path as the great-granddaughter of a slaveholder and a white child growing up in segregated St. Augustine, it was friends whose quiet views I came to trust. So I'm mindful of those things this morning because civility is not puny.
Right.
I don't believe that those of us who try to combat what's happening nationally are going to be defeated by people who are going to yell louder and threaten greater, because we have such remarkable examples of how people's quiet relationships with other people can build trust to overcome some of the most extremes of opinion. So I guess my concern for all of us this morning is let's follow Carter's example and not fall into cynicism. Cynicism is the enemy, not the people whose views are different from ours. We cannot become cynical, even if we see something as awful as we saw last week. So that's Sandra on the subject, and I welcome your comments, and I hope that you will send me your questions, and maybe we'll get answers. But at
What are we doing for next week?
Well, excuse me, one quick question for Sandra. What is your deadline for questions?
At least another week or so. It's nothing all that urgent.
Okay. All right. Just so people
know. Right now, I'm involved with end of year things like the rest of you. I only open my bookstore on the weekends because of COVID, and until I can get the vaccine, I'm really pondering whether I should not even do that out of concern. But so it's not pressing. But
okay.
Let's make it 2 weeks. That ought to give you some pondering time. For much of the rest of the book, he does get into views that, like you, I disagreed with a lot of his points. He was speaking at a time that he believed education standardized children, and that education was going to inculcate kids with values that were contrary to his. I don't. As a teacher, I wish we had that kind of influence over children, but in my lifetime as a teacher, I don't know that I ever saw it. So there's, unless you who have read the book find nuggets in the rest of the chapters that you think we ought to ponder, I think we've done about what we might have set out to do with Stephen Carter. So I would be in favor of moving on to cast, because I believe it's a relevant book. But I believe we ought to hear from the group about it.
Yeah, let's hear from the group about it. Sandra, thank you. I think we could continue to talk about civility for a while, but I do think you hit on the major points. And maybe one thing would be for each of us, as we travel our personal path, to change some of our own beliefs and behaviors. You know, maybe there would be a way to check in with each other from time to time. I don't know, but we've got a lot of great information about the philosophy and the principles, but also about actual behaviors and things that we can do. So for me, I agree that we should for now put an end to civility. We are taking, no more civility forget it. Done. Moving on. I think we're going to take next week off. It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and there is a program. It's for the most part, it's a virtual program. And just this morning, we received the link to the live stream, which will be broadcast from, I guess, Lewis Auditorium. So I will send that link to you. If you haven't already received it, I'll probably put it in the newsletter on Friday, just in case there are others who are interested. So that means that on the 25th, we can start Civility. Does everybody think that's a good idea to end now and take a week off? Yeah. Caroline, did you want to add something?
No, I agree, but I wanted to add something to Tom before we hang up about remdesivir or whatever.
Well, let me just suggest that for Civility, Melinda, we haven't talked about this, but we're in an opportunity here to like make a suggestion. I suggest that we discuss the book. It is chock full of life-changing information, things most of us have not, orientation we have not thought about before. My thought is to break it down into sections, not necessarily chapter by chapter. So their beginning has like a preface, and then the next 33 pages are what the author calls part 1. It includes 3 chapters, but it's about 30 pages and it all hangs together. So my thought was that we start with that and see how it goes. What do you feel about that? Are you all right with that? I personally have a hard time trying to keep organized when we're discussing the entirety of a book. It's very hard for me personally to do. So that's why I'm making this suggestion, but realize that we can make changes as we go along. Melinda, you want to say something?
Well, Mary Beth, you and I talked about this last week, and I think that having begun reading the book, I definitely agree that we need to break it into chunks. And I think that your suggestion of the first 3 chapters, the preface and the first 3, part 1, let's just call it part 1, would be a great place to start discussing it. And there's a lot, I think, even in those very first pages, that there's a lot that speaks to what we have been talking about today, about what motivates people to do the things that we just don't understand. Otherwise, seemingly normal, good people who can fall prey to these things. And I think just as The Righteous Mind, we were talking about that book a few weeks ago, explains a lot. It helps us to be civil toward others, whether we like them or not, because it helps us to understand why they act the way they do. And I think this book, Civility, will speak to a lot of those questions. And I also think we need practical, and I don't know that this book Civility is gonna be the way to get there, because I haven't read, but.
Are we talking Civility or Cast?
Cast. Oh, so sorry, Cast. I'm so sorry, Cast. Please forgive me. Be civil in your forgiveness of. I need, as Barb's getting, I need practice. I need tools. I need a toolbox to open up and draw from, so that I can discipline myself when I feel that reptilian brain taking over, and with my own family members, or not you, Lucy, but to listen instead of react to them, to feel that righteousness that I know I'm right because I studied history and I know you're wrong and blah, 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 blah. I want us to be able, at the end of our journey, if there ever is an end of this journey, I hope not, to come away with practical ways in which to implement these ideas that we're talking about, this love and civility that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a suggestion there. When we can do it again, when we can meet again, I would like for us to consider meeting face to face and doing just exactly what you've suggested, Melinda, because there are techniques that we can use. Are you all hearing me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine. You've been good today.
You've never come off the whole.
But I would like, there are strategies, one of which is, well, I think there are strategies that the book Civility has certainly suggested, but that other works in the field of anti-racism can help us. And it is a journey, and we have supported each other in these conversations. And I'd like for us to have a kind of, civility anonymous or something.
There you go. Step one, there we go.
That's about what it is. It's
Would that
an
turn
addiction.
into a cult?
Yeah.
A civility cult?
A civility cult.
Oh, I love it.
I'll wear horns.
Humor. I
Maybe
love a
we
sense
could-
of humor.
Maybe we could come up with our 12 steps.
Well, one of the things we are planning for when we can reopen again, I don't know whether you all are familiar with Beluthahatchee Park, but Stetson's cottage and the house next door are owned by St. Johns County, and they are a meeting center. I would like for at least to have a gathering. It is exceedingly beautiful. It is a place you walk in and you feel the beauty of the place and the spirituality of the place. So we're cocooned already in a spirit of God's creation when we go there. So when we can do it again, the Stetson Kennedy Foundation is going to have the personal group, but we are also going to invite a civility summit of all of the organizations in North Florida that promote civility to see what are you doing, what's working for you, what are your challenges, and how can we help each other? Because again, I believe we have to do this on a micro level and on a macro level if we're going to really have social change.
That's it.
Where is
Wonderful idea.
where is this place?
It's out, it's in Fruit Cove. It's about 1.5 miles south of the Duval County line on Highway 13. Stetson dammed up a part of Mill Creek to create a lake. It is a nature preserve. We have, he cut the top off of cypress trees so that they would grow in water, and hired steeplejacks to put in cross members. And so there are egrets nests, and occasionally eagles will come there. We have pretty heavy birding collection around Beluthahatchee. It's just a little piece of old Florida, beautiful Florida. Stetson tells the story that one time there was a delivery driver who was having a hard time finding him, and he was cursing a blue streak about how this place was so hidden. And suddenly he stopped mid-sentence and said, "Oh my, this is wonderful."
Yeah.
It has that transformative kind of feeling about it, because it is beautiful, and it's a proper place to talk about civility.
Here's to the vaccination process.
Yeah, right.
Please.
Some information just came in on my phone about vaccinations, but I haven't looked at it yet.
I haven't either. Well, we thank you all for today, and we will see you in 2 weeks. And I will send you the information about the live stream of the program for Martin Luther King.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay, good.
And Carol Ann and Tom wanted to talk. So I'll just keep this open, but God bless you and have a wonderful week. 2 weeks.
It's for everybody. The remdesivir is being given to everyone. It's not, that's what I have found out since this friend of mine's journey. So I was wondering myself, is anybody else getting that or did just Trump get it? But it's very.
That's a treatment, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very routinely used for people that are in the hospital and sick.
The message that just came in said St. Johns County is not scheduled to receive the new COVID-19 vaccine allotment from the state of Florida during the week of January 11th. So
Not.
we're SOL
None.
for
Zero.
another week.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my
There's
God.
I've been refreshing the website to hopefully catch, and it keeps coming up. Registrations are closed. Unfortunately, all appointments are filled, blah, blah, blah.
It's going to all the areas that vote for people that don't tell the truth. I'm being very honest. It's over in
DeSantis.
Sarasota. It's in Miami.
Well,
It's in
yeah, but St. Johns County was
St. John's
Republican, too.
County is nothing. We have nothing.
So anyway,
I hope there's more to the story than that.
we're
Right.
done for the week anyway.
Sandra, thank you very much.
Sandra, thank you so much.
Thank
It's
you. Take
Thanks.
care of yourselves, everybody.
So enlightening.
been
We
a gift
appreciate
to us
you.
that you've done this. So thank you. I can't tell you thank you enough. And I look so forward to when we're all vaccinated and ready to go to Beluthahatchee, because it is indeed a jewel in the state of Florida, much less in St. Johns County. And those of you who've not been out there will really feel its magic.
Great, thanks.
God bless
Stay
you.
safe, everyone.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, stay safe. It's more contagious than ever, so be more careful than ever. And we will see each other in 2 weeks. And thank you.